his office, his mind preoccupied with the usual grind. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and the sterile smell of coffee mixed with the faint scent of printer ink as he walked through the hallways toward his cubicle. Nothing about the day felt different, just another routine day of managing client calls, dealing with paperwork and surviving endless meetings. But as Daniel turned the corner, he was struck by something unusual. A man he didn't recognize was standing by the coffee machine, his sharp features catching the light. This wasn't just any man. His suit was impeccably tailored, dark charcoal gray with a subtle sheen, almost like it had been woven from a different fabric. His posture was perfect, shoulders squared, head held high, as though he was someone who was used to commanding attention. He wasn't looking at anyone in particular, but there was something about him that made everyone else seem almost invisible. Daniel couldn't quite place it, but he felt a strange twinge of unease. He tried to ignore the nagging sensation as he poured his coffee, but the man's presence was like a magnet, drawing his gaze. Then, just as Daniel was about to look away, their eyes met. The stranger's gaze was piercing, intense, but not unfriendly. There was something calculated about it, as if he had already read Daniel's entire life story in that single glance. Daniel quickly looked away, feeling a sudden wave of discomfort, but he could still feel the stranger's eyes on him. Before he could retreat further, the man spoke, his voice calm yet laden with an almost magnetic authority.
"You're Daniel Foster, right?"
The man's words were not a question, but a statement. Daniel stiffened, surprised.
"Yes, I am. Do we know each other?"
The man smiled, a small but deliberate smile.
"Not yet. But I've been watching you."
Daniel froze. The air around him seemed to thin. His heart rate quickened, but he fought to keep his voice steady.
"Watching me?"
He repeated, his mind racing. Was this some sort of recruitment, or was he in trouble? His boss had never mentioned anything about surveillance. The stranger took a step closer, and for a moment, Daniel could have sworn he felt the temperature in the room drop. The man didn't flinch or break his gaze. There was a sense of power about him, something that suggested Daniel was in the presence of someone who could change the course of his life in an instant.
"I've been following your work for some time,"
the man said.
"I know what you're capable of, Daniel. You're good at what you do. But you're not doing what you were meant to do."
Daniel frowned, trying to process the words. The man's confidence was unnerving, and yet, there was an underlying truth to what he said. He had always felt like he was capable of more, but the slow pace of corporate life had dulled that ambition. The promotions were few and far between, and the praise came only after long stretches of waiting. The stranger leaned in just a little, and the words that came next sent a chill down Daniel's spine.
"You could be great. You could leave this place, make a real impact, but you're wasting your potential here. I can help you, but only if you're willing to step up."
Daniel's pulse raced. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to walk away, but something held him there. The stranger wasn't offering a typical job opportunity. This felt different, dangerous even.
"Who are you?"
Daniel asked, his voice now barely above a whisper. The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he smiled again, this time with a hint of amusement.
"Let's just say I know how to recognize those who are ready for something more. If you want to take the next step, meet me in the conference room in 20 minutes. I'll explain everything then."
Without waiting for a response, he turned and walked away, leaving Daniel standing there, his mind spinning. For a moment, Daniel debated whether he should just ignore the strange encounter. But deep down, a part of him knew this was the kind of opportunity he had been waiting for. He had spent years hoping for something to change, for someone to notice his potential. And now it seemed someone had. The conference room was not far away, and as Daniel made his way there, he couldn't help but feel like he was walking toward something that could either elevate his life or shatter everything he had built. His heart pounded in his chest as the door to the conference room loomed in front of him. What was on the other side of that door? He didn't know. But he was about to find out. Daniel walked down the narrow hallway that led to the small conference room. The fluorescent lights buzzed above him, the usual hum of office life suddenly feeling distant. He could hear the faint tapping of keyboards, the murmur of distant conversations, but it all seemed muffled, as though he was in a dream. His thoughts were spinning in 1,000 directions. Who was this man, Mr. Albright? What did he want with Daniel? And why had he singled him out? When Daniel finally reached the conference room, he stood in front of the door for a moment, hesitating. His mind raced with questions, but there was no time for answers. With a deep breath, he pushed the door open. Inside, the room was sleek and modern. The long, dark table gleamed under the sharp light, but there was something oddly sterile about the space. It didn't feel like a normal meeting room. It felt like a place where decisions were made that could change lives. The walls were blank, giving off a sense of isolation, and the cold glass window on one side offered a view of nothing but the gray concrete outside, offering no comfort. Mr. Albright was already seated, his posture impeccable. He looked like someone who had been waiting for Daniel, as if he knew exactly when he would arrive.
"Sit,"
Albright said, his voice low and commanding, though without any trace of aggression. It was simply authoritative. The kind of voice that made you feel like disobedience was not an option. Daniel hesitated again. He had no idea what this was about, but something about the man's presence made him feel like this moment was important. The door clicked shut behind him, sealing him into the room with a man whose gaze seemed to cut through him. He took the seat across from Albright, carefully choosing not to appear too eager but knowing this moment would change everything. Albright didn't waste time. He was all business.
"I'm going to make you an offer."
He began, folding his hands together, his eyes steady on Daniel.
"But before I do, I need to ask you one question. Do you want more from your life?"
Daniel blinked, taken aback by the directness of the question. He wasn't prepared for something so personal. Of course he wanted more. He had spent years working tirelessly, always feeling like there was something more he could achieve, something just out of his reach. But did he want it badly enough to risk everything he knew?
Of course.
Daniel said, his voice a little shaky.
I've been stuck in this position for so long. I want something bigger, something that actually challenges me.
Albright's lips curled into a small, knowing smile, as if he already knew the answer.
"I know,"
he said.
"I've seen it in you. You're good at your work, Daniel. But you're wasting your potential here. You've been comfortable, haven't you? You've learned how to survive in this environment, but you've never truly thrived."
Daniel's chest tightened. It felt as if Albright had peeled back the layers of his soul and exposed his deepest fear, the fear that he would never amount to more than just another cog in the corporate machine. He didn't want to admit it, but Albright was right. He had become complacent. His ambitions had dulled over the years, buried under a pile of mundane tasks, client reports, and a constant need to please people who didn't care about him. He had been waiting for a break for someone to notice, but now Albright was offering more than just a break. He was offering an escape.
You're right,
Daniel said quietly, his voice betraying the anxiety and frustration he had carried with him for years.
But what exactly are you offering me?
Albright leaned forward slightly, the faintest hint of a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth.
"I'm offering you a chance to step out of the shadows and become who you were always meant to be. I can help you escape the limits of this life. You won't have to play by the rules anymore. I'll show you a new world, one where you have the power to make your own choices, where you control your destiny."
Daniel felt a sudden pulse of adrenaline. His heart skipped a beat. The words were seductive, too seductive. This wasn't just a job offer. It was something deeper, something that seemed to promise freedom in exchange for something Daniel couldn't quite understand yet. But there was a catch. There always was. Albright paused, his eyes narrowing slightly as he gauged Daniel's reaction.
"I won't lie to you, Daniel. This isn't a simple promotion. This isn't a path for everyone. If you accept my offer, you will be leaving behind everything you know. your colleagues, your position, the life you've built. You will be stepping into a world where you are no longer just another employee. You will be something different. You'll be a part of something bigger, something that will require all of your loyalty. The consequences of betrayal are severe.
The last words hit Daniel like a cold slap.
Betrayal?
He repeated, his pulse quickening. Albright's smile was gone now, replaced by a steely, almost predatory gaze.
Loyalty is everything. Once you accept this offer, you become mine. And if you ever turn against me, there will be no way back.
The weight of the moment settled on Daniel's shoulders. Albright wasn't just offering him an opportunity to rise in the corporate world. He was offering him a new life, one with power, but also one with strings attached. The stakes had just escalated beyond anything Daniel had anticipated. The room felt suddenly smaller, the air thicker. Daniel's mind raced, weighing the promise of power and freedom against the danger of losing himself in a world he didn't fully understand. Albright stood up slowly, his gaze unwavering.
Think about it carefully, Daniel. I'll be waiting for your answer. But remember, time is a luxury we don't have.
With that, he turned and walked to the door, leaving Daniel in the room alone, with a heavy silence and the weight of the decision that loomed over him like a storm. Daniel sat in the chair, his hands clenched tightly on the armrests. This wasn't just an offer. It was a crossroads. One path led to the life he knew, the safety of the familiar. The other, the unknown, a world of power and danger. The door clicked shut behind him, and Daniel knew that whatever he decided next, his life would never be the same again. After the meeting with Albright, Daniel returned to his desk, but it felt as though the office had transformed around him. The dull hum of phones ringing, the incessant tapping of keyboards, and the murmur of colleagues were all noise, a distant blur that felt like it belonged to someone else. His mind was too consumed with what had just transpired, Albright's words echoing in his head like a haunting refrain. He glanced around, his eyes landing on his colleagues, all of them hunched over their desks, absorbed in their work, unaware of the storm brewing inside him. A familiar feeling began to settle in the pit of his stomach, this sense of dissatisfaction, a gnawing ache that had been with him for years but had only grown more pronounced since the conversation with Albright. Was this it? Was this the best his life would ever be? Was he destined to be just another cog in the machine, playing by the rules and accepting mediocrity? Daniel's phone buzzed. Another reminder of the corporate world's demands. But this time, the buzzing felt like an assault on his senses. He silenced it without a second thought. His eyes flicked to the clock, 2:30 p.m. A small knot of guilt twisted in his chest. It was only 3 hours since Albright had made the offer, yet it felt like days. He could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on him like an invisible force. He had always prided himself on being rational, on carefully weighing his options. But this was different. This was not something that could be solved by spreadsheets or pro/con lists. Suddenly the office felt too small, too suffocating. He needed to leave, to escape the walls, the expectations, the monotony of it all. And yet, a part of him feared what he might find beyond the door. As the day dragged on, Daniel found himself retreating into his own thoughts, unable to concentrate on the endless reports in front of him. His mind kept circling back to Albright's offer. Leave it all behind. No turning back. The idea of a new life, of freedom, power, and control, was intoxicating. But with it came the cold, sharp reality of what he would be sacrificing. Just as Daniel was about to pack up and leave for a walk to clear his mind, his phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Sarah, his colleague and someone who had become a trusted friend over the years.
Hey, you free to talk for a minute? Something's off with you today.
A pang of guilt shot through Daniel. He had been avoiding Sarah's gaze all day, trying to bury himself in work, but now she was reaching out to him. Sarah had always been there for him, and although their relationship was strictly professional, there was an unspoken connection between them, a sense of mutual understanding. He stood up, grabbed his jacket, and headed to the break room. Sarah was already there, sitting with her coffee, eyes narrowed with concern as she looked up at him.
Hey,
She said quietly, her voice carrying a tone of worry.
you've been off today. What's going on? You look like you've seen a ghost.
Daniel smiled weakly, trying to brush it off.
It's nothing. Just tired, I guess.
But Sarah wasn't buying it. She leaned forward, studying his face closely.
You're lying. I know you too well, Daniel. What happened? Did something happen with the project?
Daniel hesitated. This wasn't something he could share with Sarah, not without risking her judgment. But a part of him couldn't keep the truth hidden any longer. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words didn't come out. Instead, he found himself staring at her, his internal battle raging inside him. Finally, Sarah's eyes softened, and she placed a hand on his arm. For a moment, Daniel wanted to tell her everything. About the meeting with Albright, about the offer, the allure of something bigger, more powerful, more dangerous. But he couldn't. Sarah didn't belong in this world he was being drawn into, and he didn't want to drag her into it.
I just don't know what to do, Sarah. I'm stuck. I don't know if I'm wasting my life here or if I'm just being foolish.
Sarah's expression grew more serious, her brow furrowing as she looked at him. Don't do anything rash, Daniel. You're not trapped. You just need to figure out what you really want. Don't let anyone, even Albright, make you think you're stuck. You've got so much potential, but you don't need to throw everything away to find it. Her words hit him hard. You don't need to throw everything away. They echoed in his mind as he left the break room, his heart heavy. But even as Sarah's warning weighed on him, a darker part of him couldn't forget what Albright had promised. Power, influence, freedom. A life that others only dreamed of. Later that night, after hours of tossing and turning, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that he was standing on the edge of a cliff. The night outside his apartment window was pitch black, the only light coming from the dim streetlights below. The silence of his apartment felt suffocating, amplifying every thought racing through his mind. The quiet moments which normally brought him peace, now felt like a heavy, oppressive force. He reached for his phone, staring at the message from Albright earlier that day.
I'm giving you time to think, but don't take too long. The opportunity won't wait forever.
Daniel didn't know why, but he suddenly felt a surge of anger. At himself, at the situation, at the way he was being pushed into this corner. He had always prided himself on being in control of his life, making his own decisions. And yet here he was, letting someone else dictate the terms. The more he thought about it, the more the choice felt impossible to make. He thought about the life he had now. Steady, predictable, albeit boring. A life that made him feel like a ghost sometimes, like his potential was locked away, never to be realized. But then, the other life, the life Albright promised, power, freedom, influence. It was like a drug, drawing him in with the allure of something he had never truly known. Was it worth the risk? The thought of walking away from everything, the security of his job, his relationships, the people he trusted, was terrifying. But if he stayed, would he always wonder what could have been? Would he resent himself for never reaching for more? Just as he was about to call Albright and give his answer, his phone buzzed again. This time, it was an alert for an upcoming company event, one that Daniel had been dreading for weeks. The annual Employee Recognition Banquet, a night where people pretended to be happy about their achievements while suppressing the lingering emptiness they often felt. Suddenly, it hit him. He didn't want that life anymore. He didn't want the endless parade of meaningless events, the facade of success, the hollow promises. He wanted something real, something bigger. But even as his heart raced with excitement, a part of him felt the weight of what he was about to lose. The fear was suffocating, and yet, his desire for change overwhelmed it. With trembling fingers, he dialed Albright's number. The morning after Daniel's call to Albright felt different, though he couldn't quite place why. The usual dull routine that defined his mornings, grabbing coffee, checking emails, avoiding the glances of coworkers, seemed foreign to him now. There was a new weight to everything, a silent anticipation hanging in the air. He had made his choice. He had taken the step toward something bigger, something dangerous. As he entered the office, he immediately noticed the subtle change in the atmosphere. People looked at him differently, like they could sense something had shifted, even if they didn't know what it was. His co-workers greeted him with their usual half-smiles, but there was an underlying tension in their eyes, a recognition of something he had already begun to feel, the price of ambition. At 10 a.m., his phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Albright.
Meet me at 1 p.m. It's time to begin.
The words sent a chill down Daniel's spine. He had been expecting a follow-up, of course, but something about the abruptness of the message unsettled him. There was no welcome aboard, no congratulatory words, just a simple cold instruction: it's time. The reality of his decision was settling in. At 1 p.m., he entered the small, upscale conference room Albright had arranged. As soon as the door shut behind him, the air grew colder, more tense. Albright was already sitting at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. The moment Daniel sat down, Albright didn't waste time.
I trust you've thought carefully about your choice?
He asked, his voice low, but his eyes sharp with something unspoken. Daniel nodded, though uncertainty crept into his chest.
Yes. I'm ready.
Albright's lips curved into a brief, calculating smile.
Good. This isn't a decision you can undo, Daniel. What I offer is real, but it comes with responsibilities. And consequences. Are you ready to take on those?
The phrase responsibilities and consequences hung heavily in the air. It was clear that Albright wasn't just talking about another job or a new opportunity. There was something darker behind those words, something ominous. As Albright continued to speak, he described a world that was far removed from the corporate office Daniel had known. It wasn't about projects or meetings anymore. It wasn't about simply climbing a ladder. It was about power, influence, and shaping the course of industries, nations, and people. Daniel would become part of a network, an exclusive group of decision-makers and manipulators, where every move he made would have ripples far beyond his current life.
Welcome to a world where you don't just make decisions, Daniel. You create reality.
Albright said, his eyes gleaming with fervor.
You won't be the same man after today. And neither will your life.
Days after his meeting with Albright, Daniel found himself thrown into the deep end. The promises of power and influence Albright had made were no longer abstract. They were real, and they were overwhelming. Daniel was thrust into a whirlwind of meetings, high-level decisions, and strategic moves that required him to think in ways he had never imagined. The sense of control Albright had spoken of wasn't a distant fantasy. It was here, now, in his hands. But with it came a suffocating pressure. Every decision Daniel made seemed to carry monumental consequences, and the walls around him were closing in fast. Albright's network of influence wasn't just a tool. It was a cage, and the more Daniel relied on it, the more entangled he became. What had initially seemed like a new path to freedom now felt like a labyrinth from which he couldn't escape. As the weeks passed, Daniel began to see the cost of this new life. The once simple moments of peace he had enjoyed, conversations with Sarah, weekend walks through the city, disappeared. His personal life was falling apart. One evening, he received a call from Sarah, who had tried to reach him multiple times. Her voice was strained, and there was an edge to it he hadn't heard before.
Daniel, I don't know what's going on with you anymore. You've changed. You're not the person you were when we first met. I can't just watch you spiral like this.
She said, her words thick with frustration and concern. Daniel's heart sank. He had been avoiding her, avoiding everyone. He didn't know how to explain to Sarah that the world he was now a part of had consumed him. He had started losing pieces of himself, bit by bit. Every time he tried to connect with her, the weight of his new life bore down on him like a crushing weight.
I'm just busy, Sarah.
Daniel said, his voice flat, betraying the lie he was telling.
I'll be fine.
But deep down he knew he wasn't fine. The truth was far worse than he could admit. He was drowning in his own choices. The first real test came during a critical meeting with Albright's associates. They were discussing a multi-million-dollar deal that would affect countless people. A decision that seemed straightforward on the surface but was loaded with ethical dilemmas. Daniel was expected to make the call, to push through the deal with minimal consideration for the consequences it would have on the people involved. His heart pounded as he listened to the men and women in the room argue over terms and conditions, each of them more concerned with maximizing profits than with the human cost of the deal. Daniel's role was simple: execute. The stakes were high. Lives were at risk. Small businesses would be crushed, employees would lose jobs, entire communities would be uprooted. And yet, Albright was sitting there, calm, cool, detached, as though the lives of these people meant nothing.
Sometimes, you have to break a few eggs to make an omelet,
Albright said, his voice as smooth as ever, not a hint of remorse in his tone. Daniel stared at him, his hand trembling as it rested on the table. He felt sick. For the first time, he questioned everything about what he had become. He had known this moment would come, the moment where power demanded sacrifices, where the price of ambition was measured in human suffering. But now that it was here, he wasn't sure if he could go through with it. Albright noticed his hesitation, his sharp gaze locking onto Daniel's with unsettling precision.
Are you going to question this, Daniel? Or are you going to do your job?
The pressure was unbearable. In that moment, Daniel's world seemed to fracture, and he realized that this wasn't just about a deal, it was about his very soul. His ambition had cost him his conscience, and he was now paying the price. By the time Daniel returned home that night, he couldn't shake the feeling that everything he had built was crumbling around him. He had made his choice, and it had led him to this moment, a place where his personal life, his values, and his relationships were all falling apart. The man he used to be seemed like a distant memory, replaced by someone cold, calculating, and lost. Sarah had left him a message.
I can't keep doing this, Daniel. I've been trying to reach you, but it feels like you don't even care anymore. I don't know who you are anymore, but I can't stand by and watch you destroy yourself.
His heart clenched as he read her words. He had pushed her away, just like he had pushed away everyone else who had cared about him. The very thing that had once been a source of comfort, his relationships, his connections with others, had now become something he couldn't even manage. He called her, but she didn't pick up. The call went straight to voicemail. The sense of loss hit him like a tidal wave. This wasn't just about the deal anymore. It was about losing everything that had made his life worth living. The silence of his apartment was deafening. The loneliness was suffocating. Days later, Daniel found himself at a breaking point. The weight of everything, the deals, the lies, the compromises, had built up to an unbearable level. His world had become a machine, and he was its newest cog, spinning faster and faster without any control. He had made the choice to climb higher, but now that he was at the top, he realized that there was no summit, only an endless descent. In the middle of a late-night meeting with Albright's team, Daniel felt his heart race and his chest tighten. The room seemed to close in on him. The voices around him grew muffled, the faces blurring. He realized, with a sickening sense of clarity, that he was trapped. The path he had chosen had no end. It was an endless cycle of power, manipulation, and betrayal. He stood up abruptly, knocking his chair over. The room fell silent as Daniel stumbled toward the door, the weight of his decisions crashing down on him. Albright's voice cut through the air, sharp and cold.
You can't walk away, Daniel. Not now. This is your life now. There's no going back.
But Daniel didn't care anymore. He was no longer afraid of losing the power, the influence, or even the security. He was afraid of losing himself completely. Daniel walked out of the building, his breath coming in shallow gasps as he stepped into the cold night air. The city stretched out before him, its lights twinkling like a mirage of hope, but he felt disconnected from it all. He had traded everything for power, but in doing so he had lost the very thing that made him human. His ability to feel, to connect, to love. As he stood there, facing the empty streets, he realized the truth. The offer Albright had given him wasn't just a choice between two paths, it was a choice between his soul and his ambition. And now, standing at the edge of everything, Daniel had nothing left but the wreckage of the life he had chosen.